tensions were very high now in Boston between the colonists and the British. Um, the colonists were extremely angry over the different passings of the Sugar and Stamp Act and the Townshend Act. Um, they were also upset already about the fact that the British sent in soldiers into Boston. The boycotts that were being organized by Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty were escalating in size. And the British officials that were sent to Boston to try and keep order, they were also feeling the tension and feeling the pressure of being in this area and kind of fearing for their lives. And so here brings us to the first real kind of violent outburst that occurs in Massachusetts from all of this tension, and that's known as the Boston Massacre, right? And so this painting that you see here on the screen, right? This was actually what was printed by Paul Revere on the Boston newspaper, right? And you see here the Boston Massacre. In Britain, though, this event was known as the Incident on King Street. So just from the headlines and the titles alone, right? There's two different stories, two different versions of the story that we see here, two different sides. And of course, for the colonists, it was a massacre for the colonists. They took this event and kind of rode with it to kind of bring and rally people together against the British. So within the city of Boston, the British soldiers were seen as a threat. And so resentment existed on both sides. And so one night in 1770, you had a group of British soldiers that were standing their post. Soon enough, a mob of colonists came together and they started to shout and taunt them and call them names. They began to throw snowballs at them. They threw other objects at the soldiers. The mob began to grow and they kept taunting them. And eventually, one of the soldiers fired into the crowd. And from there, a couple of other soldiers also fired into the crowd. And so once that was over, you had 3 colonists that were instantly killed and 2 that later died from their wounds later on that evening. The first among those colonists that died was Crispus Attucks, who had been a free slave in the North. And really, we just remember because of the fact that he is the first colonist that dies in the Boston Massacre and kind of the first casualty that is considered of the Revolution because of that. So these soldiers that fired into the crowd that were here, they're eventually arrested and are taken to jail. And then comes the idea of, well, they deserve a trial, right? They've been arrested. We can't just imprison them. They need to have a fair trial. So John Adams, which was the cousin of Samuel Adams, he was a lawyer in Boston. And he was really an advocate for the fact that everybody deserved a fair trial. Everybody was entitled to a fair trial, no matter whether or not you agree with them or what they're doing, but they are entitled to a fair trial under the law. So he agreed to represent them in court. The 8 soldiers that were arrested were eventually freed on the grounds of self-defense because of what was happening that night. And what's important about this whole concept of the trial and the Boston Massacre is not only just what occurred and how it brought the colonists together, but because of the fact that the soldiers in the end after the trial were set free and were then agreed that it was self-defense and they understood that they were fearful, the trial demonstrated that the colonists weren't after just going after the British. They were committed to justice. That's what they were looking for. Through the trial, through what they were protesting and arguing that they wanted only to have fair representation in the making of these laws, that was their protest. They were protesting the idea that what was going on in their eyes was unjust, rather. Right? They were only in search of justice. And the trial of the Boston Massacre, the trial of the British soldiers, kind of reinforced the idea that the colonists were in search of justice. Wherever it may lead, that was really their ultimate goal. Their ultimate cause was justice.